Hello and welcome to ELT Under the Covers Crumbs on the Sheets, where we take a broader look at the education, learning and teaching industry community, and we go a little bit more in depth into topics that are on our minds and have been suggested by you, our viewers. But first, introductions. I'm Neil of NeilTEAcher.
Hello everybody, it's ProfesorRich.
Rich, we're back at it. We've got more crumbs on the sheets. Time to vacuum them up.
You know, they get everywhere, don't they?
Yeah.
They get into all kinds of places on your physical, corporeal body. And then you have to have a shower. And
So, what's on the agenda today? I figure a good starting place would be to deal with the aftermath of our interview with Anthony Hocking. If you have any thoughts or points during that talk where we talked extensively about mental health in teaching and outside that you'd like to bring up.
When you said aftermath, I just kind of thought like, whoa, it sounds like, the industry was turned on its head and we made national news and all those people got fired. I mean, that would have been great, wouldn't it?
I am walking, talking clickbait, so
the bombshell. Yeah. So basically follow up to that. Well, I think we could have keep talking for quite a while about
Oh
Anthony.
God.
He had some really passionate things to say about the industry and mental health. Occupational burnout was sort of where he kind of targeted it, didn't he? And I can't remember if I actually said at the time, but the specific area of occupational burnout that I could really relate to is this kind of loss of passion due to institutional limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a part I can really relate to. And it's one of the things I'm struggling with right now because the institution that I work with follows a very prescriptive syllabus, and there's a few issues with it, and it's be very difficult to change. So basically, we're teaching something that we call skills for life, and it's English as a second language. So it's these are learners who are in the country, living here. Some of them are working here, and they are learning English to get this qualification from the government. But also, it's probably about 50-50 or 60-40 or something, the percentage of students who are kind of doing it for themselves and the percentage of students are doing it because they want the piece of paper to go on and do something else.
What's the piece of paper allow them to do?
Well, if you get the very top level or sometimes the second to top level, then the piece of paper at the very least allows you to study other courses. So, for example, if you want to do A levels or you want to do like a HND or something like that, then you can prove your English using the level 1 or level 2 ESOL qualification. It's only recognized in the UK, so you can't then go to France and show them it. They won't care. And that's deliberate because the government subsidizes the program and they want people who go through the program to stay in the UK.
The people that go through the program, are they paying for the program? Or is it?
It depends on personal circumstance. If you earn under a certain amount, which I believe is about £20,000, then you either don't have to pay or you only have to pay part of it.
Oh, okay.
Also, if you're under the age of 19, you don't have to pay. Or if you are a refugee or asylum seeker, you also don't have to pay unless you're working. If you're working, you still have to pay. So if you're a refugee, which means you're legally recognized here, then you could be working and you may have to pay. So it depends on the criteria. But what you have to pay is really cheap. So it's still, even when you pay, it gets subsidized.
Oh, okay.
Right? You're not paying the full cost. Right.
Okay.
So it's really, compared to a private language academy, it's really cheap. So it's a really cheap course. So demand is high. People queue up to try and get into the college.
It's very important that we demand high.
That's right. There's a waiting list of about about 9 months.
Oh,
so
wow.
even if you come to the college and you're like, I want to study, take my money, they'll be like, well, you're going to have to wait. Yeah. So there's a waiting list of about 9 months to get onto any course. And yeah, the issue is they're teaching to a government syllabus, and the government syllabus, the specific exam body that we use. I don't know if I want to sort of mention names since I'm actually working at the institution at
Yeah,
the moment. So
I
I
wouldn't. You
don't
just
want to don't
allude.
want to rock the boat. Yeah, I don't want to rock the boat too much. But anyway, the exam body that we're working with, it's very, it's a very, it's grammar based criteria in all instances, including speaking. So, for example, the criteria says this is one of the achievement criteria. So this is one mark that they must get,
Hmm.
right? And it says uses language appropriate to the level for narrating, explaining, asking for information, giving instructions, and making requests. So far, that's okay. And then it says, for example, perfect tenses, conditionals, modals, phrasal verbs, active and passive voices appropriate, a variety of simple, compound, and complex sentences, uses a range of adjectives, intensifiers, adverbial, and prepositional phrases appropriate to the level. See, that's where I start to have a bit more of a problem with it when it's the way it's saying stuff like that. So one of the other criteria says asks appropriate questions using a variety of question forms in past, present, and future tenses. So this is like a presentation,
Hmm.
and then the other students ask questions. But it says ask appropriate questions using a variety of question forms in past, present, and future tenses. So they have to like synthetically ask a variety of questions using different forms.
Right.
So
Okay.
I have to say, oh, you said this before. Is that what you meant? Oh, what are you going to do in future about this? You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
you have to actually deliberately put that stuff in because that's what the criteria says.
Hmm.
I don't like it at all. I really don't like that. It's so synthetic and clunky.
Hmm.
And I really don't like the tasks that they come up with.
Hmm.
Like a presentation, fair enough. Presentation skills are useful, and I don't have a big issue with that. But then there's what they call discussion, but it's actually a role play. And
Okay.
a role play for a speaking exam, I have issues with that
Hmm.
because it's not real. Just make it real. Look, I'm a teacher, you're a student, we're going to talk about something, and I'll use that to assess your speaking. I don't need to say, right, I'm a shopkeeper and you're not happy with a product you brought last month. So now you're going to come in and ask for a refund. Okay.
Hmm.
Like, what the hell's that? It's like, I don't know. I'm not keen on that. It might be a fun activity to do in class, but it just seems a bit daft having that kind of thing in an exam. So because of that, um, it really affects what we need to teach because the primary metrics, I might have mentioned this before, the primary
Hmm.
metrics on which the college is judged, and therefore it all filters down, obviously, all the way to the teacher level, are pass rate, one, two, attendance. So, number one thing is pass rate.
Hmm.
And our pass rate currently is about 90%.
Right.
Right? So 90% of our students pass in either the first time or resits. That includes resits. So we could say only 10%, that includes dropping out. So only 10% drop out or don't pass the exam.
Hmm.
That's from the full percentage of students who start the course. So it's very high pass rate, really, because, normally you get people dropping out. If you're doing Cambridge English, you don't even put all the students in for the exam, but all of ours have to go in for the exam. If they do the course, they go in for the exam. So it's a really high pass rate, and that's our primary metric, and we're really wanting them to pass. So we have to, backwash is obligatory. It's not like you don't have a choice unless you're just really confident that the students are going to pass, or you don't give a rat's, which is not good, is it? You've got to whatever metric you're being judged as an employer, it's very difficult to not just ignore that. I mean, it's not going to go well for you in the long run, is
Hmm.
it? So you have to get those pass rates. You have to keep them up. And so, at some point, I'm going to have to make sure that my students know that they're going to have to ask questions in a variety of past, present, and future tenses in a presentation.
Hmm.
And I hate it because that's not the way I teach, right? So it's like going to a musician who plays rock music and saying like, right, I want you to perform Baroque, you know.
Yeah.
You're going to do the Baroque
It's a little
dance
bit of rock,
on an
but it's got a
acoustic
more
guitar.
brat at the front.
It's got a bra at the front. It's got a bar. It's rock after you've got drunk. That'd be good, wouldn't it? No, but that's the point.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is where I can really relate to Anthony's talk on occupational burnout, because that's when I really feel burnt out, because it's like, it's not the way I teach. It's not why I'm a teacher. And it's just really, I would say it's even worse than having to do all of the admin stuff that teachers hate, like
Hmm.
marking exams and designing syllabuses and answering emails and stuff like that. Having to having someone come up to you and saying, this is how you have to teach and this is what you have to teach, is the biggest killer of my enthusiasm to go into the classroom.
Hmm.
And if I then go into the classroom and I know that I have to do something like that, I just want to get it out the way, and I feel cynical about it. And I think it even comes off with the students as well. I mean, I find it, I have kind of a loose tongue anyway, so I find it hard not to just tell the students that I think something's bullshit as well. So I'll just, as I'm even saying it to them, I'll just be like, it's such bullshit, you have to do this. It's like,
Well,
that's not good
why
either.
can't you say that?
Well, it's just a bit negative, isn't it? I suppose. I mean, you don't want students to be too negative about an exam, because that can come off badly. If a student goes into an exam and they think the exam's bullshit, then that could,
Well, I mean,
in some
like I say,
circumstances, that could,
because I've done it when I've taught IELTS, and I've had people that what need to pass IELTS to go to university, but they're doing sports, science or something,
right.
like some sort of sport or art, and they're like, why am I writing these essays? I'm like, because you got to pass the
Right.
exam. I'm sorry. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the system.
That's a good point. I mean, particularly what comes to mind actually for IELTS is the writing task one, where you have to analyze a process or data table or graph and describe the main characteristics of it. I mean, if you're going to university to study philosophy, then that entire skill set is near enough useless.
Yeah.
So it is, yeah, it's interesting. Again, just an issue with exams. There's so many things that I could say about exams. I think there is a way, of reforming the exam system,
Hmm.
but it's really quite depressing that, you know, I don't want to use current year, but that's really where I are. It's really quite depressing that in 2023, oh my God, we still have this sort of prescriptive grammar-based exams going around, because this stuff really was argued out of court in the 1990s. I mean, the lexical approach and all that kind of stuff, it all come on, and everyone was talking about authentic materials and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And, it does give people a bit of a headache at first. Because one of my early jobs in my career, living in Valencia, was I worked it was just after you left. I
Hmm.
went and worked at the Universidad Politécnica de Valencia, the UPV, and they were on board with a copy of Cambridge English called ACLES, but with a fundamental difference,
Hmm.
that ACLES was really focused on, and probably still is actually, really focused on authentic materials.
Hmm.
And what they meant by that is any material that's used in their exam, and that goes for listenings as well, must be from an authentic source. Now, they did actually re-record the listenings. So the listenings were recorded by actors, in fact, teachers. I'm on some of them, or I was. Had to go into the recording studio and do it. So I didn't. That wasn't particularly good, because that's never that natural. But the idea that the script should be unedited and taken from the real world, and also the same for the readings. You can't edit the readings. It has to be just a newspaper article as is, or whatever, right?
Hmm.
And when I first kind of come up against that, I was like, oh God, that's a bit of a pain, isn't it? It's so much easier if you can just adapt text and stuff like that. But, many years later, I agree with that now. I think that's good. And I think that that's really the way we should be doing things. Don't make it too sugar coated. Don't we Because there's ways of scaffolding real text. There's ways of presenting it in a bite-sized format that allows even beginners to deal with something that's at least real.
Hmm.
I mean, for example, you can find signs and stuff like that. A sign in a hospital that gives the instructions for the fire escape or something like that. That's real
Hmm.
language. You're not editing it, and you can do stuff with that with any level.
Hmm.
of English learner. And, I believe in that now, and I can really see the utility of it. I needed to be convinced, though. It did take me a while. So I can understand why people still kind of balk at it and don't want to do it and all the rest of it. But I just wish that it was the way we were doing things. And I wish everyone would do it as well. Because really, we do need kind of a systematic revolution or systemic revolution in that regard, because otherwise you get the students coming in and they react badly to it. And it's so much the amount of time I've had to spend like convincing and turning students around to sort of my way of thinking, it gets annoying at some stage.
Hmm.
Every new student you get, you give them some authentic stuff and they're like, oh, I can't, I don't understand. Oh, why are you speaking so fast? And stuff like that. And it's like, because they've been trained to think that accuracy is paramount. They have to understand every single word, otherwise it's a waste of time. They have to speak perfectly, and they've been trained on the kind of exam tick box system. They want to learn the present perfect and things like that. And you have to kind of teach them out of it. And
Yeah.
to come full circle on this, the frustrating thing is that currently the primary metric on which my job is valued by my institution is a prescriptive grammar-based test.
Hmm.
And so it goes completely against the flow of the way that I think we should be taking the students.
Okay.
And as I said, anyway, there's that ACLES was doing that like 15 years ago. Probably they still are, hopefully. And then the British government's doing this, just this tick box style system.
Okay. Um, I think I can cut away a lot of chaff. Not like I'm saying your stuff is chaff, but like to make it a little bit more succinct and kind of give an overview and summary of what you're saying. So here's my perspective, and I absolutely 100% agree. What you're doing is correct. It's the correct way we should be focusing on. But that aside, what I'm looking at is what we have is your employer that is having to that has that. No, let's go even further back. The course that you're teaching, your the what they get out of the focus of this course is to get this certificate so they can go on to do other things. It's not necessarily that they are to learn English communicatively. That seems like a happy byproduct. The institution is aligned with the employer and the whole educational system to make sure that students passing this exam and get the certificate, and even the students themselves are focused on passing the exam and getting the certificate. And then so there's all of this all together over here, and then there's Rich that's doing the correct way of saying you're trying to learn English, you're trying to communicate in English. This is what you do to communicate in English. All of this over here is what you do to get a piece of paper. These are not the same thing. They don't even really intertwine that much at all. So all of this is against you. At what point with institutional burnout do you go, well, I just have to remove myself from this? Because you're fighting everything. There's nothing on your side whatsoever. So my thoughts are: should it not be the case that you either remove yourself from that situation, or you find a happy medium to be able to do what you want to do, but also, beat to the drum of all this other institution, societal ideas, etc.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's probably the dilemma of anyone who's suffering from
Like
institutional
any good teacher that cares about their
occupational
job.
burnout.
Yeah.
Well, anyone who suffers from occupational
Oh yeah,
burnout. I
that's
mean,
true.
even
Yeah, yeah,
Anthony was sort of hinting at that himself, wasn't he? He was saying he was kind of he kind of felt like he had one foot out the door, I think,
yeah.
in the place where he was currently working. I mean, yeah, it is like that. And he said, if you push against it, you get known as the troublemaker. And that's exactly right as well. I've eased off in my kind of open criticism of this stuff, especially when coordinators around. They're lovely people, and I don't think that they would consciously hold a grudge about it. But I can tell that if I keep rubbing against the sandpaper, then eventually there's going to be, I don't know, there's going to be a wound to start appear, right? So yeah, I do. I have kind of I've took my foot off the kind of public stuff, and then you get a bit of an issue because it's like, well, how are we ever going to change anything? Well, in my circumstance, first of all, I don't think you're quite right when you said everything's against you. It's not like that because you have to
It seems
realize,
that way.
well, it does because I haven't really mentioned I haven't given the full picture. Although they are the primary metrics that we're measured on, there is student feedback. So there is the students feeding back. Also, I did mention not all the students actually just want the piece of paper.
Hmm.
As I said, probably about 40% are there just to learn, Primarily aim is to learn. You don't even really care that much about the exam. And you have to make them care because the college everyone wants this high pass rate, right? So,
That must be incredibly frustrating to you because you've got some students that absolutely align with you, and you're like, yeah, 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 but you should still care. You're like,
yeah, I
oh
mean,
no,
I
I'm a
I
simp
had
for the institution.
well, I had a student who failed the exam and isn't continuing because she's got too much work or something, and I had to convince her to come in and do a resit, and she's like, well, what's the point? I'm not continuing, and I'm like, um, yeah. But eventually, what I said was, well, in the future, you might continue, and you wouldn't want to have to repeat the whole semester again, so you might as well come in and resit. And she did, and she come in and she resit and she passed. So okay, but she definitely didn't need that piece of paper, and yeah, so as you can see, I have to do these things. Not that I mean, it's not totally against my principles to get someone to come in and resit. You might as well not wait. You might as well get the piece of paper. It's only half an hour of your time or whatever at the end of the day. But still, yeah, it's annoying. I think we do have to accept that there's always going to be things that aren't. We can't kowtow to what every single individual teacher wants in an institution. That's not how institutions work.
Hmm.
There always has to be some sort of compromise. So my current perspective is yes, I think there is cause to be thinking, well, perhaps the grass is greener, and I have to keep my eye out with that. Sure, I think that is the way people should think. Because what we don't want is we don't want to lose our passion for teaching.
No.
Obviously, it is possible to do that because you only have to go and look at teachers in general. Show me a room full of teachers, and I'm sure I could get a whole group of those teachers and very easily see how disillusioned they are with the profession, and they're just doing it for a job, and so on and so on. And maybe some of them started out like that, but I don't think everyone starts out like that. So no one wants to become that because what is the point then? If teaching becomes a job, you've got a real problem, I think.
Hmm.
It's not, it's not a profession which suits being a job. Well, I'm
Yeah.
not really someone who believes in jobs anyway, but someone has to clean the toilets, someone has to do whatever. So there are some things that you just do for the money, right? Well, if teaching becomes like that, we've got a big problem. So you have to do something about when this situation arises. So yeah, I do think one of the things is keeping an eye out, and that's made quite tough by jobs like the one that I've currently got, where they've got a nice pension and it's very secure and da 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 da. People love jobs like that, don't they?
Yeah.
They love to sit in them for decades, and that doesn't help either. Which comes to one of my kind of controversial and potentially self-harming kind of visions for the future of teaching. But I'll get onto that in a minute. I just want to finish my thought about what individual teachers should do if
Well,
they're in this situation.
mhm.
So yeah, one is you keep an eye on the job market, sure, looking for, if I mean if a job comes up at a college down the road and it's like, and we believe in authentic materials and you know groundbreaking exams that simulate authentic English and real situations or whatever, then yeah, I'm probably going to be interested and start inquiring. So yeah, you've got to keep an eye out. The other thing though is you can push for change, and
Mhm.
things do change sometimes, but there's a right way and a wrong way of doing it. And the wrong way is to just start bleating about it in the teacher's room
Mhm.
every day. That's the wrong way because it's unlikely to do anything. You're going to create resistance, going to come up against problems. You have to find out what the source of the kind of the ground, the base reason why things are the way they are, and then tackle it there. So, and obviously the college is not going to do anything which goes against its interests. So the thing is, what do the government look at? They're going to look at attendance and pass rates. That's why they're so concerned about that. So one possible solution could have been for me to say, why don't we stop using this exam board and use another exam board which does use authentic materials? But the thing is, the only way I'd be able to sell that to the decision makers is by saying that also that it'll be better for our pass rates. And that's extremely difficult to do given that our pass rates are currently 90%. Because
Mm.
if they were doing Cambridge English, I think 90% would be a damn good pass rate for an institution. I don't know. I've not really looked at the pass rates for Cambridge English and
Mm.
whatever, but yeah. So it'd be very difficult to sell a different exam board. So then the only other possibility is to actually go directly to the exam board and try to convince them. And honestly, that's talking about my specific situation. You have to translate this into whatever is the cause of your particular teacher occupational burnout. And by the way, I don't feel like I have occupational burnout. I just have this element of it. But yeah, I mean, that is what I feel I need to do. I'm probably going to write a letter and I'm going to send it to, I'm going to send it to the
You're doing
exam.
the exact same thing that you said that no one's gonna do.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. But it is true that pretty much no one ever does it.
Yeah,
That's
it's
that's
true.
that's that's probably what will count on my side. I mean, I might even write the letter and get a few other teachers to sign it. So, it's got a couple of signatures on there. And I will argue the case. And to be honest, I'm almost certain that it will have zero effect. And I'm not even sure that they'll respond. They might. And if they do respond, that'll be interesting because they might try and justify the way they do things, which is fair enough.
Hmm.
But to kind of go back to what you've said and probably what you're predicting here, all I'm really doing is kicking the can down the road. I'm sort of partly keeping myself happy by lodging some form of protest. And I'm well aware that eventually nothing's going to happen.
No,
So
I think you're being realistic, but you're also doing what you feel you can do, and then going,
mm,
and if I can't do this, is this the point where I stop, or do I then
yeah,
start to look into doing research to start to accumulate data that to show how much better authentic materials
yeah,
is, and then
yeah, yeah. I
and
mean,
like you can keep going further down that rabbit hole, but at what point is it
yeah.
diminishing returns? But I
Well, you
like
never know.
I like the neuro politicking
Yeah,
to because that's kind of is what you've got to do in the real world, isn't it? You've kind of, if you want to get some stuff done that other people don't want to do, you have to package what you want to get done into something that's going to benefit them as well. It's just, like, did you really think you'd be doing this as a teacher? No, but
well, yeah, I guess not.
you have to
But
expand to do this.
it's interesting that you mentioned politicking or whatever, because I think the next step, actually, after that, thinking forward, after the example, would be the government, and it would be to write to, I don't know, someone. It's either going to be Home Secretary or Minister of Education or someone like that, or even local MP, to make the case to them that having a government supported exam board that are using a synthetic grammar based syllabus is not the best way of producing a generation of migrant workers who can communicate well in English.
Hmm.
So I guess that would be the sort of next step in my case, and then you really are getting your feet your hands dirty, aren't you?
Hmm.
But yeah, could do, and there's things that make that. You're right. It's not maybe not what you would imagine to be doing as a teacher, but there are incentives there. I mean, you end up if you end up making a name for yourself as the person who's pushing some agenda like that, it actually can be quite good for your career, can't it? Look at
Yeah.
Jamie Oliver, the school meals guy. Everyone's going on about Jamie's campaign for school meals all the time, even though I don't think it really had any effect at all. It has been good for his name recognition.
Yeah.
So, there's things that can come of this sort of stuff as well. Will I actually do all that? I don't know, but it's in my head to do something. And yeah, and in the meantime, you just kind of tolerate it as
Hmm.
best as you can and do the best you can for your students, which is always going to be the case as a teacher. As I said, there's always going to be some compromise.
Hmm.
It's so frustrating when there's this stuff's coming up and you just think this is so outdated that this stuff should have been gone before I even started teaching.
Yeah.
I started teaching in 2008, and that, there was already a decade of like this authentic materials are the way to go stuff out there. So, it should have already all been gone. And instead, we're in 2023. We've almost got Chat GPT teaching everyone,
Hmm.
and we're still having these problems.
Yeah. It's a problem that I don't think we will see resolved in our teaching career lifetime. But I never know, because things change so fast. It's so complex. It could just take one person, but they have to be that one person with a specific set of skills in a specific position of power to do something. But you can always keep trying. But it is like you say, you've really got to think, how much time am I going to invest into this? Because we have a very limited amount of time on this planet. And do you want to if do you want to be spending that time with your family? Do you want to be spending that time pursuing other passions,
Mm.
or is this something you want to get into? So you've kind of got to get into that, but also be realistic in terms of, I could invest everything into this and get nothing, and then I'm done. See you later, world, and that's it. And you've got to be okay with that outcome. Um,
I,
but
I
that's
I think,
that's up to the individual, really.
yeah, and I mean, again, at a greater level, I think what I really crave is for us to be getting away from this centralized model of society and education and
Hmm.
government. And unfortunately, what it actually seems like is happening is we're going in the other direction. Everything's becoming more standardized, not just on a national level, but on a global level now.
Hmm.
So now the whole world is doing things the same way. I mean, just look at things like IELTS and Cambridge English. They're global entities, and everyone's learning the same way.
Do
It's
you know what I
totally the
find
opposite.
ironic is that, like with IELTS and that, there's you know about this idea of like international English, right? So
Mm, yeah,
the Brazilian, the Russian, the Chinese, the European, they all speak English, and they all speak international English, and they all communicate and understand each other well. But you
yeah.
throw in a native speaker, and no one
The
understands
elephant in
them,
the
and they
room.
don't understand them either. So it's kind of like
Mm,
two divergent English standards, which is I find hilarious. I'm happy that I can walk between both worlds, but it's
yeah.
it's funny, like when I come across, so like some of my family, and they're speaking with like a someone that's international English, and it's like
Tricky.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you're like,
it's
who
true.
they don't want to change their native English style to communicate, and the international English person's like, well, I've already learned this. Do I really need to learn it this native way as well? I
Yeah.
mean, come on, can we have a compromise? So I find that hilarious, but
I think that's a whole can of worms
it is
that would
another
take a
day.
yeah, it would be a whole other thing. And I've got some my thoughts on that are not very clear either. It is something
I
I
actually have a
used to feel.
question,
Yeah, go on.
um, because I feel like we end up diving into that too much, and I want to stick with the mental health. I have a question. So I've done the big five, and the personality test, and I've always been a fan of like the Myers and Briggs and doing these sort of
Mm,
things just to kind of I like to know myself, and I like to know kind of my strengths and weaknesses, but also I kind of see areas where weaknesses I can try and build those up, strengths I can play to, yada yada yada. um, and one of the things I always come across with is this idea that personalities lend themselves to different occupations. So, if you are um, a musician, you're going to be high in creativity, and I can't remember what it was in Big Five. Was it ocean? So openness. You've got to be high in openness or something like that to so those people that are high in openness are going to tend to be more creative, tend to be musicians, and then there are people that deal well with stress. So what is that? I can't remember what neuroticism, low in neuroticism.
mm,
So if you're going to be a surgeon, an emergency responder, a police officer, it behooves you to really think about your personality and think, am I low in neuroticism? Can I handle stress? Is this my
mm.
temperament? Should we think about teaching in the same way? Because it seems to be a stressful job, and it's a lot of it is instant. It's not like police, where you're dealing with a criminal and it's kind of baked into the cake. It almost feels like the stress with teaching is it's added in there. It's not baked into the cake. It's just the demands that are placed, with all the admin and fitting to the standardization and everything like that. It doesn't seem necessary in the same way that if you're a first responder, you're dealing with a situation that is your job. The stress for teaching seems to be added in there, but it's been this way for so long, and I've spoken with so many teachers, and and all the books that I've read are teaching so stressful. Like, should we now consider this to be a stressful job? And therefore, if you're going into teaching, should you consider yourself a person that has to be able to deal with stress? What do you think of that train of thought?
I actually, I don't think teaching is that stressful, to be honest. I think that, and I'm someone who is quite high in neuroticism, but I think if I had like a job as a paramedic, I'm pretty sure I would be more stressed. I don't think I would deal well with that.
Yeah,
If I was in the army or something, I think even more so. I
yeah,
think I wouldn't deal with that. I think it might just be the case that a lot of people, I think in teaching, you get people who are all over the board in neuroticism,
hmm,
but you do seem to get quite a few people who are quite high in neuroticism, especially language teaching.
hmm,
And that probably contributes to people saying it's stressful because it feels like it. I mean, it does feel like it to me, but
hmm.
I just think relatively, if I was in the ER or something, it's not it's not that level of stress. And if I
No,
was in like financial markets as well, these are the jobs where people lose like 10 billion in a day and then jump out of a window, because it's the stress is so bad they want to die, you know.
yeah,
So that's a different thing, you know. And I'm sure you could probably find the odd occasion of teachers having breakdowns and stuff. Not so much for me. I mean, maybe if you're working in a really terrible state school, I mean, basically take my current complaints about the job being sort of prescriptive and working to a syllabus, and then multiply that by 100, you
Hmm.
know, and then you're stuck in some horrible institution. You've got no hope of changing, and you've lost your passion for teaching already, and the kids don't do what you say, and it might even be a little bit dangerous, you know, because some of those kids, I remember my school, it was a bit of a zoo sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well,
like,
I say it because, this is the thing that Anthony was talking about, where they should have, like maybe like a counselor within a school, or, they should have like check-in points and stuff. And that's what they do with firefighters, police
yeah,
officers, stuff like that. They will say, if you are, because that's what they found, this, for example, with police shooters, the police that would get into that would respond, and whatever situation they responded to, there was they shot and killed somebody. This is American statistics, and it was, they found that people that had come, those police officers would often come from a previous call that was actively very stressful, like there was an abuse situation, something involving, like hurt children, something like that, and then and immediately they went into another situation,
mm,
and that situation ended up, they ended up killing
yeah,
someone, and it was that there was obviously, there was a very high correlation between the two. So they understand these, that they, if they have these specific stressful situations, that these people in these jobs, when they do that, they have to take a bit of time off, or like not do anything for a certain period of hours.
mm,
So I'm like, well, isn't that kind of what Anthony was suggesting? Like, okay, there's this stressful time here, so let's remove this teacher for a little bit, or
I think
but
what
then
what you
but then
need,
then you're but then you're saying, well, a first responder is very different to a teacher, and I agree with that. So, like, uh, how can we compare the two? And how can we make it fair? Because that someone in the army might be super stressed and going straight back into that, and they're dealing with it okay, but like the teacher that's got a really heavy workload is not. So that's why I'm thinking about temperament.
yeah, I think things do have to be a little bit different in teaching because of the schedule, and canceling classes is difficult, and having cover is hard to justify financially. So I think the point Anthony made about just being recognized in a human way
Yeah.
by your manager, if you go and you say, God, this situation just happened, just to be able to have some relief. Oh, well, I'll cover the first 45 minutes of your class. You go and have a coffee, sit down,
Hmm.
you know, take a deep breath or whatever. That sort of option, I think, is definitely appreciated and useful.
Hmm.
So I think, yeah, that having those kind of things in place is great.
Hmm.
Taking it to the extent of sort of saying, well, if you have high neuroticism, don't be a teacher. I wouldn't say that actually. And if we're going to go that personality route, and this is sort of getting onto a slightly different topic, but if we're going to go the personality route, then my preference, maybe it's because I'm high in openness myself, would be to have people really high in openness as teachers.
Hmm.
And I mean people who are creative and intelligent, and people who want to continually open Pandora's box.
Hmm.
Because I think the worst thing that a teacher can be is a mouthpiece for either their
Mm.
own dogma, or the government or institutional dogma. And I think both of those kinds of teachers just make me feel a bit ill. to be honest.
Well, it's
You know,
dangerous. It's dangerous, and it's something that I've been thinking about uh, extensively because I've been recently reading Richard Feynman's autobiography in preparation for a future teaching masters video. So if you're listening, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that bell because that's coming down the pipeline. And one part of that is he's a famous theoretical physicist, Nobel Prize winner, mathematician, just an amazing genius of a guy, literally a genius. And he is invited down to Brazil to teach physics in Brazil. And physics was kind of like new at the time, theoretical style. And he goes there and he's teaching this physics course and he's asking questions and he's just like some questions he asks and he gets answers, and then sometimes he'll ask the same kind of question, but he won't. He's asked the previous question, and he knows from the previous question they know what to do. So, but he'll ask them to do something, but they don't do it, and what he finds out is that the way that they were teaching is basically the students were memorizing the text. So if he asked them about, I know I'm not a scientist, so if he asked them about refraction or something like that, they can explain it really well. But then he's like, so what happens, like if you have this piece of glass or some sort of gem or jewel and you shine some light in there, and what happens to that? And they're just he gives an application in real life, and he just gets silence and he doesn't know what to do, and they don't know what to do, and this is all of them. And he chastises the whole Brazil. You'd love it. You should read the book. He chastises the whole of the Brazilian education system, and his he didn't say it outright, but what I was thinking was like, these people, he was literally a person that was, he worked on the Manhattan Project. He created the bomb. He solved what the issue with the Challenger was. They had the Challenger disaster. He was the person that was brought in to find out what went wrong, and he found that out. Now, that was because of his educational background of being really open and just kind of figuring out and tinkering and having good teachers. But the whole of Brazil, there, I think he said there was like 2 students that worked well, and they were briefly educated outside of Brazil, and that's their technology. The whole of Brazil's technology department, for the future is done because they're not creating anything new. And if government advisors come to them and talk to them, we want to talk to them about having an atomic bomb, what can you do with this, la 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 la, they won't be able to give any good advice. So it's so dangerous if you really think about it. And if someone is not properly educated, but are under the belief that they are, and then get put in a position where they have to use that knowledge that they don't have. Geez, come on.
There have been various dystopian science fiction films and TV series which have tackled exactly that, the idea of kind of lost knowledge, where civilization, it's not even an apocalyptic event, it's just the idea that civilization comes to a point where the technology is still there, but finding someone who actually understands how it works is incredibly difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a risk sometimes. And I think definitely one of the issues here is, it's like what you said. It's the danger of being too prescriptive, of having people who just regurgitate, of not having your students question things. And, it's, again, this is something that you just think like, God, didn't we solve this problem like decades ago at least? I mean, the reason why the education system globally is the way it is it all comes from the British, right? I mean, the
Hmm.
education systems all over the world essentially are modeled on the original kind of British post-industrial revolution Victorian education system. And the reason why that education system was constructed the way it was, it had a very specific purpose, right? And you want to get a lot of people in a classroom, someone at the front, and you're taking people who were from a class that had very low literacy. So, the working class in the 19th century couldn't read and write. They
Hmm.
had no need to read and write because they were going to be farmers and chimney sweeps and all that nonsense. so so they didn't learn those kind of skills. They focused on just practical skills. And but then suddenly with the Industrial Revolution and all these factories, you need people to read and write because you need them to count 5 iron ingots, put them in the furnace, and take out one. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
need to have that mathematical ability. And also, when there's a sign that says "Do not press the red button," they need to be able to read it and not press the red button, right?
Yeah.
So they needed to very quickly change a generation of people.
Hmm.
They needed to quickly train this generation of kids to have the skills that would enable them to work in a factory. That's what the Victorian education system was all about. And we don't want them being creative. We don't want people going into a factory and saying, "Oh, but what does happen if I press the red button? That could be exciting." We don't want that. What we want is, "Sir, yes, sir. No, sir. Red button. No. Got it. One
Hmm.
plus one is two. Two plus two is four." That's what they want. So they
Hmm.
designed it like that. And it was successful, very successful. And then it spread all over the world. And then all over the world, that's the system we have. We've got the exams, we've got the this is right, this is wrong, stigmatize mistakes, forget creativity, not interested. And since then, the world's moved on. And many, many times people have spoke about how we need to reform education, how we need to make it about creativity, problem solving, soft skills. We've got to bring people into this. And there's
Four
always these
C's.
kind of little, yeah, let's do that. Oh, we're going to have this new thing. Oh, we're going to change this thing up. But the actual fundamental change never happens. And for some reason, we always seem to rubber band back into this is right, this is wrong mentality. And saying that, I think the British education is still one of the most forward thinking ones in the whole world. You know this yourself. You go
Hmm.
to China, and from what you're saying, Brazil, then, the creativity just gets completely beaten out of you. In some cases, literally, because I think they still have corporal punishment in China, right? They still whack the kids in the
No,
school.
they stopped doing that. It
Oh, did
actually,
they?
yeah, no, it stopped doing it, and it became like a social media thing. People would post their if a teacher would do that, and like they'd get attacked on social media and stuff like that. It's very,
Okay.
it is still relatively new, but
Right.
within the
Well, that's
past
good.
decade, but you know,
I
um,
mean, because in that situation, it's like you've got teachers who are literally physically abusing kids to make their personality worse.
yeah,
In my perspective,
yeah.
I think people who can't think outside the box, and I mean, they're frustrating students. People who have been like that as kids. For me,
Hmm.
and I've got a couple now, and I'm actually there's one in particular I'm thinking of, and I'm losing the battle of bringing her around to my way of thinking. I think
Hmm.
she wants to know the right way to say it. What's the right way? What's the right way of this grammar? What's the right? That's what she wants.
Yeah.
And it's not me, and it's very difficult to convince her otherwise because she's very much in that framework of this is how things work. And she's one of the worst performers in the class because she spends all her time translating word for word, speaking her own language with the person next to her, and asking me to write stuff on the board, which is, in my opinion, not that useful for her. So it's
But
yeah, it's it's
she
very
she's
frustrating.
doing what she's supposed to be doing in that
Yeah,
she's
it's not
tried
her
to do
fault.
into the trying to do the certificate, and what you're trying to do is allow her to communicate in
Yeah.
English. She's trying to learn communication. I think I can actually tie the things that we talked about at the beginning and this last part together, and I think what we need to really think about, and when people think about is education, is what's the purpose of learning a particular topic. So like with learning English, the purpose is to communicate, and I maybe also people should think about the dangers of that and the utility of that at the same time. So you gave a good example with the rote, where read a sign that says don't press the red button, but when it also, if you don't learn the communication aspect of English, what dangers does that lead to? Does that person then get a job, where they become a police officer and they're trying to communicate with a person, and because their English level is not fluid enough, they're not creative enough, they can't get that person to calm down, to not do something dangerous, and all they can do is speak very plainly and not in a way that's convincing, etc. And also now we're moving into AI, we're moving into chat GPT, where you have to be able to communicate with this AI in a very you have to have a really deep understanding of
Mm.
communication to be able to actually get the information and the utility out of this AI. If you don't
Yeah.
have that, you're not going to get any usefulness, any utility out of it. We talked about this before we came onto the air, that these people are just saying, just a standard person is just asking questions or something like that, when you have to think, well, I need to get this AI to do something for me, I need to be specific and communicate my needs, and think, how am I going to communicate that and put it in a structure so the AI can best create for you. It's going to be so necessary going forward, and if people don't have these communication skills, they're done for. Hello? It seems like Rich has
Built at the other side, and as we said, we're going to go into that at some point. And I think the other issue, actually, because you were talking about, oh, they might become a policeman and they don't understand people and stuff. I think that's a very small possibility, but I think that's unlikely, because I think actually what tends to happen, if people really stick to that kind of, and it's a hard plateau, and they just never get any better from that point. So they'll get to like intermediate, for example, and then they'll just stagnate, and they'll just be stuck there forever, because they just keep on. This is in language learning we was talking about specifically. They just keep on in that frame set that they've always used, and they think it's because they need more practice, and oh, I keep forgetting vocabulary and it's stuff like that. But it's because they've got that kind of word for word thinking. They're focused on the wrong areas, and they're being too tight about accuracy, about the fact that they have to construct sentences word by word and get everything right. They're trying to make language into a logic puzzle or
Yeah,
mathematics,
I
and
can
it's
actually
not the way
expand
language
on that a
works.
little bit. So there was this program in the US for convicts, where they would give convicts graded readers, and to encourage convicts to, encourage their literacy, but also they found that it expanded their vocabulary. The more they expanded their vocabulary and had ways to, therefore, express themselves, the less likely they were to reoffend, and they were actually more better able to integrate into society. So you also have to think that, if you're hitting that plateau, you're also limiting yourself and your expression. So how does that express itself with you? Do you become more frustrated? Does it restrict the jobs that you can get? It changes your mind. For me, it must do, because you are stuck in a box and you're not able to fully communicate who you are. So, but these are more like esoteric kind of dangers, right? So it's hard to kind of quantify for many people, but I think your example is much better.
Well, I think the point you made earlier about, and the topic we were talking about earlier, really outside of the context of language learning, just in terms of standard education system, I think that is more poignant. Is that the right word? It's that's the critical thing, because we could really end up walking into this sort of weird dystopia where we've got people just regurgitating stuff rather than really being kind of a bit more flexible, creative, problem solving about it. And let's just really hope that that's not the way that we go with things, because, well, it'll be bad. But it's
I like
so
that.
it's so stuck.
Communication is so important. If you don't have it, it's bad. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
we don't want
no,
to
it's fair.
we don't want to go backwards as a society, or even worse. We do not want to be in the situation where no one knows how to program anymore because the AI does it or something. It's like, we need to understand the fundamentals of how things work. Otherwise, you can definitely get to a situation where, well, societal collapse, or an unsolvable problem brings the end of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. I mean, to
So
go back to the idea of teachers and what teachers need, to be, yeah. In my opinion, what we need teachers that are encouraging people to think and question and problem solve and question everything, including what the teacher tells them, and accept that there are more than one ways to skin a cat. And if a student finds another way of doing something that gets the objective, then you reward them. You don't tell them it's wrong because they didn't do it the way you taught them. That kind of attitude. And in my opinion, this is where the controversial thing that I kind of alluded to before. One way of doing that would be to lower job security, but increase wages for teaching. So
holy shit, Rich.
my idea would basically be that, every so often teachers have a review of their performance that's done in a way through kind of lesson obs and CPD and things like that. And if it seems that there's a teacher who doesn't really care anymore, isn't really that interested in CPD, just going through the motions or whatever, then you say, well, maybe it's time for you to move on. And I mean, no one's going to be happy with that. That's never going to happen. And it's my kind of radical
Maybe
perspective.
send them on to a
But
teaching retreat sabbatical, and you go find
yeah,
your
I
passion
mean,
again.
it's quite selfish as well, because I think as someone who's relatively passionate about teaching, really all I want to do is get rid of all those losers who've lost their passion and get a pay rise. But
Scorched
so,
earth.
and it's also inspired by just how many people you have, especially in state teachers. I mean, you remember them when you were at school,
Yeah.
surely, even now, just, and they obviously don't give a fuck about teaching.
Yeah.
They just want to pay off their mortgage. It's just their job. You're a thorn in their side as a student. So, and one of the reasons for that is because you can't bloody sack teachers. You know, it's one of those jobs that's just like, it's like solid, isn't it? You know, you have to have a really good reason to fire an institutional teacher.
Yeah.
And it's the same with you. Universities got it even worse, you know. So that's why I say, and maybe I'm framing it the wrong way by saying take away job security. I don't mean like we start having 0 hour contract teachers, but I just mean that maybe contracts do need to have a limitation. You know, maybe the idea of a contract for life, maybe we do need to look at that and say, well, maybe we do contracts as 5 year terms instead, you know,
Hmm.
and that at least gives the institution a chance to say, you know what, this guy for the last fucking 5 years, he's been phoning it in, doesn't give a shit about the kids, you know. I mean, it's serious, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's has a serious effect on people's lives.
Yeah.
You know, I've had some bad teachers, and it's really fucking discouraging when a teacher takes a disliking to you and doesn't give a shit. And you know, I mean, when I was trying to do A levels at my school, and I told the IT guy the A level course I wanted to do, and he was so resistant to it, you know, and he was really negative about it as well. It was just like, oh, I don't want to teach that one. I'm not going to teach it. Blah blah blah. The way that he was saying it was so odd. You know, it was like I was being annoying by asking him about it. You know, for me it was important. If I'd have done that A level, it would have changed my entire life. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't in a way, because I'm not sure that I'd be happy sitting in an office working in IT all the time. But it for you know, you can see how that would have a very damaging effect on someone, and it's just because that guy didn't give a shit. He wasn't interested in his students performing well. It's just his job, and I was making trouble for him by asking about an A level course that he didn't want to teach.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a kid, you're just like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. But,
I
you
didn't
know,
push
they,
back. Yeah,
yeah,
I
because
didn't push back.
you don't understand the
Totally
broader
yeah, it completely
why.
discouraged me to push back. Similar situation on the other pole, actually. And I mentioned I was interested in studying psychology to the like A level guy, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we can look at that." And in the room was a science teacher who happened to have been my biology teacher, and she said, and she never really liked me that much. She thought I was a bit weird, and I was a bit of a nerd, and she wasn't. And she said, "Oh, psychology, that's my area. I graduated in animal psychology. That's not really your thing, is it, Rich? You're more into your maths and physics." Totally put me off it. Never looked at psychology again. And ever since, I've been fascinated about psychology. I could have had a fucking A level in it, but no, because of that comment. So, you know, that's what I mean. You know,
Yeah.
teachers are fucking important.
Yeah.
And when a kid expresses some sort of passion or interest, we need teachers who are gonna encourage that, kind of no matter what. We can't have this sort of negative shut down. It's just a job mentality. So yeah, maybe my idea is a bit radical, pulling the rug out from my own feet. Actually, as a teacher, I actually have one of those cushy, safe ass institutional jobs right now
Yeah.
that I could sit in for the rest of my life and actually build up a pension if I wanted to. Yeah, no, I don't know if that's what we need, because somehow we've got to weed them out. How do you do it? Or how do you ensure that your teachers are, you know, I don't know. Anyway,
No,
rant over, I think.
I agree. I'm not sure the extent, but it is the rich way. What I would like is to encourage people that are listening, that are watching, to leave your comments and let us know what you think of rich scorched earth policy of strapping collars to teachers, and if they don't teach very well, they buzz them on the balls or something like that. What would you do? What do you agree? Any other thoughts about what we've touched on in this particular podcast? Let us know. Remember to like, share, subscribe. The reason to do that is because it encourages others to come and give us a listen, and it gives us more resources to actually do this for longer, and for making it better for all of you that are listening as well. Final
Awesome.
thoughts, Rich?
Yeah, final thought is Bon Jovi. It's actually a shortened version of Bon Giovanni,
Okay.
which means good John in Italian. So when you say Bon Jovi, you're just saying good John.
Oh, okay then.
All right, Bon Jovi.
Bon Jovi, everybody. If you're looking for more information from myself, you can go to teamteacherchina.com. We've got a whole bunch of materials, PowerPoints that you can use instantly in the classroom. We've got a Team Teacher China YouTube channel where we have videos teaching you how to use those materials. Team Teacher English, where we put those materials into a video form for self-study. And Team Teacher Baby, where I take my experience as a teacher and put that into parenting.
And go to youtube.com/ProfesorRich to see some English teaching. You can catch me weekly live streams on Oxford Online English YouTube channel. Oh, and also you can do a YouTube search for POG space UK, and you would get my alpha version of my new gaming channel, which actually just have some trial content on there at the moment. You can email us here at eltunderthecovers@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to contribute to the show.
Smash that like button, share and subscribe.
And watch 100% of the video and don't click
Exactly.
off. Thank you.
Bye.